So welcome everyone to our panel on the evolution of workspace designs to facilitate collaboration and engagement. This panel is going to discuss workspace designs and how it relates to improving people's wellness and facilitates their success. We will discuss how different configurations of remote workspaces influence employee engagement and contributions by combining academic and industry expertise. In this panel, we will discuss a wide range of relevant trends and issues, including rebranding and repurposing existing office space to be more collaborative and to fit various needs and development of architectural solutions to address the multitude of modalities while prioritizing the goal of inclusivity among others. My name is Tavisha Rao, and I'm a junior at Rutgers Business School with a double major in business analytics and information technology, which is also known as BAIT, as well as marketing. I'm also part of the Women Build program. Thank you for attending the panel on the evolution of physical space. Julia Eisenberg is an associate professor at Pace University, and she will be moderating the panel. Dr. Eisenberg actively publishes and serves as a reviewer for a number of leading management journals, including the Journal of International Management, Small Group Research, and Human Resource Management Review. Our panel includes Monica Ponce de Leon, who is an architect, educator, and dean of the School of Architecture at Princeton University. As a Cooper Hewitt National Design Award winner, Monica leads MPDL Studio with multiple offices across the United States. We also have Sarah Parra, who is responsible for the US implementation of Hub Porter at EFM North America. Sarah has 20+ years of experience in local advocacy, community development, and social impact programming. Finally, we have Tessa Tinney, who is the Senior Director and Chief of Staff at Cisco. At Cisco, Tessa's work is focused on the employee experience and the company's commitment to hybrid work and an equitable future for all. I'm excited about this topic and panel because I think it's going to be very thought-provoking and insightful. We hope you enjoy the panel.
Hello, everyone. It's great to see you all, and thank you for joining our panel, and thank you for those of you who are on Zoom. So we'll begin the panel by each one of us taking a turn to provide a quick intro as to what we're doing and what we're hoping to learn from each other. And then I prepared some questions that I'd like to ask my fellow panelists, and then we'll turn it to the audience and take your questions and hopefully engage in a lively discussion. So thank you, Tavisha, for that introduction. I am a professor at Pace University in New York, and I have been studying Nancy DiTomaso. Professor Nancy DiTomaso is in the audience. My doctorate is from Rutgers, and Nancy was my dissertation chair. So it's wonderful to be back on campus. And even back then, when I was a student, I was very interested in the influence that remote work environment has on individuals' ability to contribute to their organization. And so I've been studying geographically dispersed work, globally dispersed work, how people work when they're in teams, and some of the factors that influence that work. Some of the projects I've been working on most recently include looking at structural arrangements, whether they make a difference, and also looking at the impact of working in isolation, right? And even the idea of defining what an isolate is. And we had sort of a preliminary get together before this panel, and we were talking about how do you define somebody who's an isolate, right? Is it somebody who's just working on something on their own, but they're surrounded by others in the office, but just the project specifically they're working on is unique to themselves, and so they're in fact isolated, but they're still socializing on other topics with others, right? And then there are people who are working quote unquote in isolation from home, as some of our panelists will talk about, right? But they don't feel isolated at all because they're constantly communicating with colleagues, and other people are also working from home, so they're not really missing out. And so this is some of the research that I've been focused on, and I would love to hear from fellow panelists as well as members of the audience and people on Zoom as to how you're looking at this phenomenon, and what are some of the ways for us to progress and make a difference, particularly as it affects careers of women and the implications that it has for women. Wonderful.
Mónica Ponce de Leon. As mentioned before, I have one foot in academia as a professor and dean, and one foot in professional practice by running my own firm and video studio. And in my academic life, I have looked at the history of the workplace, going back over 100 years, from the physical environment of the workplace, from the point of view of the physical environment, and understanding the relationship actually between gender and the design of the workplace, and how it actually traces the history of women in the workplace by looking at the physical environment. In my own professional practice, I have done actually work for corporations such as Goldman Sachs, and actually suppliers to the automakers in Michigan. So looking at the workplace from the point of view of contemporary trends, both in practice, but also in my own work, in my own academic work, and understanding the relationship between working remotely, working in place, actually before COVID, and then how COVID has become a tipping point that has actually brought this even more to the forefront, and that in relationship to women's lives and the relationship between individuals and their families. So I'm very curious to learn from my fellow panelists as to looking at it not just from the point of view of space, but other kind of research. So.
My name is Sarah Para, and as was mentioned, my background is in social work. Over the past 20 years, I worked in the nonprofit sector. So this is actually my first adventure into the for-profit sector at EFM North America. And what EFM does is, it's a company, a consulting firm that's really at the cross-section of real estate, technology, and human resources. And over the course of the past 20 years, the purpose of the organization has really been to bring employee wellness back into the workplace. And one of the ways we do this is through a program called Hub Quarter. And there's a lot packed into this definition of Hub Quarter, but we did feel like we had to actually, put a definition to it since it is a relatively new concept. But Hub Quarter is a program in which public and private entities are empowered to really share their space so that it suits the evolving needs of remote and hybrid workers. And those workspaces, from that, we created a network really of flexible and distributed workspaces. And those workspaces are designed in such a way to promote collaboration and engagement and to really build community. And so again, there's a lot packed into that definition there. But what's unique about the program, and what I think really speaks to women in remote and hybrid work, is where these workspaces are created. And the network is actually created within local business districts. So if you think of all of the vacant and underutilized spaces within local business districts, so think, an art gallery that has a communal table that's free, or a local bank branch that has a conference room that's free. A lot of these spaces may have been used rather frequently before the pandemic, and post-pandemic, we're just seeing them not populated in the same way. And so what we try to do is to connect these spaces that are underutilized within our communities with the remote workers that certainly appreciate the flexibility that their company has provided them, but at the same time, they would like to connect with their community as well. And they would like to get back out in the community and, work with other individuals in the community, and again, re-engage, reconnect at that level. And so that's a little bit about what we do.
Tessa Tinney. So I work at Cisco within the IT department. So Cisco is one of the biggest networking companies in the world. I think we like to say that every packet that goes over the internet actually has to touch Cisco equipment at some point. I don't think that that's hyperbole, actually. So I come at this from a technology perspective. I work from home pretty much 99% of the time, and have the benefit of amazing Cisco technology that really makes that a really fantastic experience. I work in the design organization in IT, and so we're really all about creating amazing experiences for employees from a technical perspective, And we believe that technology actually has a huge influence in culture because technology influences how you work every day. It influences your behaviors, and culture is really just a collection of behaviors, how we interact with one another. Are we frustrated? Are we empowered to do our work? So from a research perspective, we have a research team and we research friction. So we have a friction index that we're constantly measuring, essentially how frustrated are employees with simple tasks or very important tasks, from doing their expense reports to onboarding. A new employee onboards, you open that laptop your first day, you're super excited. Is it an amazing experience or a terrible experience, particularly if you're working from home and the closest IT person is, an hour drive away? It can be a pretty disengaging thing if that experience isn't flawless and wonderful. So yeah, I'm looking at it from a technology perspective, but we're also looking at, what's the intersection of the technology and the in-person experience, and how do we make experiences equitable no matter where you are. So we really want, whether you're alone in a conference room or in a large group in a conference room or you're home joining, we want that to be a great experience. We want your connectivity to be perfect. And we also want to elevate people in communities that for a long time have not had an equal seat at the table. And we really believe that remote work, hybrid work can make that a more equitable experience.
Great, thanks so much. So Monica, as was mentioning, that one aspect of what organizations are doing right now is creating or maybe testing out and looking at different designs. So from an architectural perspective, from what you've seen happening in the industry, what are some of these designs that may promote equity and may promote better utilization of the space? That's our mention.
Before COVID, the big trend was to try to bring fun into the office and make sure that employees had breaks and outlets that led them to do other things other than work. And that was a way of keeping people engaged in the workplace. We did see before COVID a little bit of hot desking, where people would do some work from home for different reasons, and they would share desks in the office, and there was some flexibility, but it was not a huge trend, I would say. We did see a pivot after COVID, where hot desking has become much more prevalent. And with it, a whole series of questions have come to the foreground. One being how personal is and how efficient is that desk that you're sharing with multiple people. And we have seen companies actually become very smart, and every company is very different, but companies have become very smart in understanding, okay, who actually is sharing and what are the actual things that they're sharing the desk for. So that hot desk is no longer neutral. Is now designed very intentionally for very specific functions, for very specific tasks, for very specific modes of work. So that, I think, is the bigger trend that we see. And also, I think companies are beginning to understand, we were talking about this earlier, that those who choose to work from home or those who you want to work from home, you need to create an environment for them at home that allows them to do their work. So thinking of the home as an extension of the office is something that companies are beginning to think about. And I am hoping that companies will also begin to think about thresholds and transitions. How do you end your day? Because of course, one of the negative sides of technology has been that now the workday keeps on going. It used to be because you were working in the office, you would leave and that was the end of your day, hopefully, right? Maybe you bring work home, but you had to physically carry something. Now work is everywhere, so you could just it's endless. It's like you look at the clock and it's always 6:30. Oh my God, I went over, right? This is happening more and more to everybody. Our work days don't end. So that I hope that companies begin to understand this as opposed to take advantage of it, and that we create transitions so that you can mark the end of your day and really work.
No, that's a really great point. And I think one of the things that companies should start thinking about, from my own research, we found in this one research project that there's a difference in status depending on which location you work for, right? specifically examine working from home. But if we look at, if we can extrapolate the results of that research, if there's a difference, whether you work in location A versus location B, right? What happens if you're working from home? What does that mean for your colleagues when they are trying to decide on who's part of their group, who is closer, right, on relationships and connectedness? So these are some of the questions that will begin to take even more of a front stage as organizations make these decisions. And speaking of shared spaces, Sarah, you are definitely in that space, right, where you're trying to find new ways of sharing.
Definitely. And it's funny because you mentioned you were talking about the redesign of space, right? And I feel like when we first started the planning process with Hub Quarter, for me, it was just about going out into the community and talking to people and hearing their experience. So I would talk with municipalities, I would talk with business improvement districts, local businesses. I would talk with the remote workers. I would talk with social work professionals or people that were in the financial industries. And then we would talk to corporations. And really, it was just about getting feedback, talking about the idea of shared space, because we weren't even at the redesign stage yet, right? We were actually what I like to call the redefined stage, because we actually had to be redefining where work happens, right? And I think even post pandemic, we became very comfortable with the co-working spaces, right? And we were even comfortable with cafes. But then you start throwing out, you know, local real estate agencies and bank branches. And that's when people are like, whoa, wait, slow down, you know? But what we found is that many of these companies, you know, they're already forward facing, they're already providing a public service. And they're actually looking to diversify their service and to give back to the community in a way that they haven't in the past. And so I think we had to spend a lot of time in redefining where work could happen. And then, you know, we could go the next step and say, okay, well, now that we've assessed the situation, we've expanded our definition of where work can happen. We can talk about then repurposing the space. And so in my opinion, you know, historically it was always work happens in the office. And then more recently it was, okay, well, work happens at home. And I would say those locations are still going to continue to be integral to work, right? They will never go away, but we can probably expand that a bit more. So we say yes to office, yes to home, and yes to the local community.
And the environmental implications, what you guys are doing are amazing, because we all remember the old times where you will commute for an hour, you will commute for an hour and a half, some people commute 2 hours. It's, you know, terrible for your life, your health, and the environment. So I think that you are really finding a very interesting middle ground that allows the office home to be mediated by these other spaces that are underutilized. So
yes, that the environmental impacts is so we work with some research entities that help us track the environmental impacts to make sure that we're in line with the Sustainable Development Goals that the UN established. And so in addition to, you know, CO2, some of the things that we look at has to do with how the fact that we're utilizing existing space. So instead of going out there and developing new office buildings and whatnot, you know, we're trying to make use of the resources that we have available.
Are your clients integrating the environmental impact into their own CSR initiatives? Like, is that a feedback loop for them? Because we all have goals, right?
Totally.
Yeah,
Yes,
they are. So
yes.
they're saying that we're saving. That's really cool.
So what we can do as we're working with corporations, obviously every corporation is different and they have different areas in which different feedback that they want essentially. And so, but that is information that we are going to be able to share with them. And so yes, that will be cool when we, you know, when we can successfully do that and make that connection.
And something else, Sarah, that you mentioned when we were speaking yesterday is that some corporations might even be able to use it as a tax write-off when they share some of their space. So again, from Monica, from your perspective, what you were just mentioning, right? It's a win for everybody because you now have better synergy. It makes it much less expensive or maybe even free for nonprofits. So more nonprofits can be operational and make an impact. And meanwhile, there's a benefit for the for-profit company to engage in that activity. So really everybody is winning in that sense, right? And Tessa, from your perspective as a leader, what have you seen? Kind of how are people reacting to this, and how are some of the trends that you've seen in terms of how this has been affecting particularly women?
I think from a cultural perspective is probably what you're asking about. You know, it was easier when we were all at home, or when we were all in the office, and then it was easier when we were all at work. We kind of knew how to do that. We were all on similar footing, and then now in this new environment, I think there's a judgment of who shows up in the office, right? So I'm a mom of 2 kids. I love working from home because I can be there for them. I integrate them into my life, and my work is kind of all encompassing too. So it's a whole life. It's not, you know, my work life and my personal life now. But I don't go to the office. So what does that mean for my career? So from an equity perspective, we have to ask that. But we're all kind of, as leaders, pushing ourselves to recognize that face the office, or as I used to call it, butts in seats, is not a proxy for productivity at all. It never was. When we were all in the office, it didn't mean that the person sitting next to you was being highly effective or was the best employee in the room. And just now, you know, we have a messaging platform like all companies do, and that little green light next to someone's name, it means that, oh, they're online, they're busy, right? It is not a proxy for effective work and being productive. So the culture shift for us as leaders has become measuring outcomes, not presence, not whether the green light is on or whether you showed up to that meeting in person. But it's really measuring the work that we're delivering. And that's a whole different way of thinking about work, at least for us, right? How do you actually measure the outcomes of knowledge work? It's hard sometimes. So we're really focused on that quite a bit now. And I think it's also from a cultural perspective, thinking about trust, right? Like we have to, as a leader, I have teams that I have to make sure that they're productive. And I just need to trust that they're doing great things, and that, you know, they'll come to me when I need to clear some things and help them do their best work. I need to just trust that they are working when they need to, and they're going to deliver the work when they need to, and it's going to be great. And so this new hybrid environment requires, I think, it's less, I hope, hierarchical. It's less command and control. It's out of sight, out of mind in some ways. But if you have that trust in each other, I think that we can help each other just do great work. Isn't that what we all just want to do anyway?
And I think I was just going to mention that I feel like as a leader within Cisco, it says a lot that you are also working remotely, because I feel like what you're doing then is normalizing behavior. So it's not something that is just for a particular department. It's, you know, leaders within Cisco are also working remotely, and therefore you are all invited to join.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. It's a wonderful thing.
So I saw there was a question in the audience, so we can certainly kind of engage the audience, and then I'll go back to some additional questions. Absolutely. Please go ahead.
A couple of things. I have I guess 2 questions based on some of the discussion I heard. You know, where the company that I work for, our policy really is, you know, we do believe that there is value in an office collaboration as it drives innovation. So a couple of things I have a question on. What is your thinking around driving innovation remotely? Because there's some discussion around having those impromptu connections in an office space creates kind of brainstorming, which you normally would not have working remotely. And then the other thing that Monica, you mentioned is you said that pre-COVID, there was a trend to bring fun back to the office. You know, so I'm starting to hear, oh, we need to have more fun in the office. So what is the current office trend now after COVID? No more fun.
Fun is too expensive.
I think the current trend has been one of downsizing, where when you use a physical space, it's much more intentional. Is used for collaboration that needs to be happening in person, is used for interaction between staff members, is used in a way that is not just pre-functionary. Because now there is a there's a dollars amount attached to the space that we're much more subconscious, let's say, about the dollar amount attached to the space. And I think the percentage of hot desks in offices has increased exponentially. And the trend is becoming, thankfully, to understand that, just a surface is not enough, that desk has to be meaningful and helpful to those who are actually sharing it. And I agree that a lot of research supports the fact that casual interaction in the office leads to inventiveness, and that leads to thinking imaginatively about the work at hand. But there is also certain advantages of the digital platforms that are yet to be understood. One story that I like to tell is that I've been using actually WebEx since 2007 because we have offices in different locations. And very early on, I realized that there was a way that we collaborated that was very different on the platform than in person. So one of the things you do as an architect is that you sit around the table with your team and everybody has pencils and everybody's supposed to draw. When we were physical, very few people drew but me. There was this idea that, oh, that's the master architect and I'm too self-conscious to draw, right? When we went into the digital platform very early on, when we started collaborating across offices, I realized everybody was drawing. The intern was drawing, the new guy that just started yesterday that was drawing, everybody was drawing. There was less of that self-consciousness about we are around the table and they're looking at me do this. It was more like, oh, I need to speak, let me do this, right? And I think we were discussing earlier, I think that homogeneity of the grid, the head of the company is the same size as, the person that is running that is running the meeting, that same size as the intern that might just be attending the meeting to listen. There's a certain homogeneity to the digital platform that I think we need to think of as a positive that may actually drive other kinds of inventiveness that are not the same as when you bump into somebody in the hallway, but that might bring something else to the company as well. So in other words, I don't think that there is a better or worse or an either or. I think hybrid is really the answer, and understanding how to support certain pieces of work differently in multiple ways.
If I could just add to that, I think there's a huge benefit to asynchronous collaboration too. We all think of like, oh, we have to do it together right now. My personality, I freeze up when I am in a brainstorming and I feel like I'm on the spot. But I am just ask me the question, and in my own like focus time, I love thinking through it asynchronously with people. So I think that there's just this assumption that there's only one way to also be collaborative and innovative, but there are lots of ways. Additionally, I think getting together and kind of when you know people that you're working with remotely, it helps because you've gotten together in the office on occasion. It does help build the relationships, and it does help foster, freedom, creativity, that innovation when you are working remotely. So I think I agree with you. I think that some hybrid approach is ideal.
And in general, research does say that it's more conducive to brainstorming, to be in the same place, to throw ideas on the board and to observe as many cues as you can about your audience, right? So you throw an idea, but if all you see is just, that little square, while it could be equalizing, it also takes away some of the richness of the cues that you otherwise would have seen, right? What they're doing with their hands or how they're, but just additional cues from their body language in reaction to this idea that you just shared. And so it does distract a bit from the innovation process. But if you think about the many, many different careers, it's just affecting certain types. And so we can't make generalizations about vast majority of jobs just because for some jobs, it really does help to be in person, right? And because some people, as Tessa mentioned, prefer to work on their own, and then they only engage at a time that is really truly relevant. I think Sumita had a hand up.
Yeah, so probably for Monica and Sarah, since I'm talking about geographic spaces more here. And I know that, so when you're working from remote, I think geographic spaces become quite important. And people, therefore, you have to create some occasions for them, which kind of mimic the bumping into the hallway, such as the coffee machine or the popcorn machine, you know, you kind of make it larger so people can kind of congregate with each other or something like that. So my first question is, there are success stories, but can you also tell us about failure stories where you might have designed spaces and they did not work in terms of collaboration, whereas you as an architect might have thought that they would have worked, but they have not. I mean, in my talking to some other architects, there are some, but I would like to hear from you. The second, I'm sorry, the second question is, I thought you mentioned that there are women versus men differences in terms of how they interact with space. And I would be really interested in hearing how men and women have different approaches to space and geography.
It's hard for me to talk about failures because we tend to do design that is research based, and we do a pretty deep dives into organizational culture, and we do deep dives into the specific needs of a client. So I can't think of an example where I said, oh, that didn't work out. But what we have seen in terms of trends is that the fun in the office work for certain generations, but not for others. And that older folks actually felt alienated by those moves, and they very much felt left out. And that actually created sort of two kinds of people at the office, those trends of bringing the fun into the office space. You know, for women historically, hierarchy has been something, structures of hierarchy is something that has kept them out of work, out of the office space. So anything that can be done to erase hierarchy from a design point of view has been very effective in making women feel welcome. Same with hot desking and providing flexibility. There's a lot to be said for mentorship happening in the physical space. That's why having a place to land when you come to the office, when you're working from home, is important. But having the opportunity to work from home so that you can be a mom, so that you can tend multiple things at once, is something that has really been empowering for women, and that's what the research shows.
So I mean, I'm just going to follow up a little bit. When you say you're going to erase hierarchy, again, referring to the office, the physical office space, how do you erase hierarchy? Well, I mean, I'm just looking for concrete examples where you would.
So when you look at the history of the office, until quite recently, offices were designed with a secretarial pool in the center. My mom was a secretary, so I grew up with this experience of going to work with her, where she would stick me in a closet, basically, and she would be in the big secretarial pool. And then all of the executive offices are in the perimeter because they get the light. So the staff, which were all women, will get artificial lighting, and the senior executives, which with exceptions were mostly men, and this has a history of over 60 years, were in the perimeter with a natural light, right? So the first thing that I did when I designed my first space is that I did not have any offices in the perimeter. And I created an open space that had skylights in the dome, so that everybody had the same kind of lighting. And that actually created more of a collaborative space that actually created a very much an even-handed approach to mentorship, because you can actually observe what other people are doing and how they do it. So even if they don't put the time into you as a mentor physically and literally, you can see them do their work. So you learn from what they're doing, whether they want to be your mentor or not. So I think there are things that we can do through space that help people support each other and that help create those natural exchanges. So I hope that begins to answer the question.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking of like the technology firms where they have these beer kegs, and I mean, I can imagine, for example, that's a great meeting point for the males,
Yes, correct.
but not necessarily for the females. And
Or anybody who doesn't like beer.
I mean, I don't like beer personally, and so I'm kind of assuming that other men don't like beer, but that's just me, and my bias. But
Yeah, there are certain, this is in my mind why the 80s/90s onto the office at the end of the day failed. Because it really was a very male and a very young approach to the office. It was a way of quote unquote attracting talent. I hate the word talent myself. Because it presumes that you were born already knowing everything, right? There's a problem there. So I think that's, they're still considered successful. I mean, Google will tell you, my brother works at Google and he, Google, not him, but Google will tell you that was extremely successful. But successful for what, I think is the question to ask. So.
I think Nancy had a question.
Yeah, I have a completely idiosyncratic question, but one that's very important to me, so let me sort of ask it, but as a preface, I'm completely skeptical about this notion that you have to be in person together for innovation. I just think that is not true, and I don't know where those ideas necessarily came from. I have seen companies that have been wedded to those ideas, but I just don't think there's really any evidence that that takes place. There is some research that shows that going into the office is very disruptive and you don't ever get anything done. Certainly in my case as an academic, all of my stuff to do work is at home. If I have to go into the office, it's absolutely lost time. So just wanted to get that out and could say a lot more about it. So my idiosyncratic problem question is that I just retired. And it turns out as I'm getting older, so is everyone else. So all of the people that I rely on are also retiring. My doctor, my lawyer, my dentist, and so on, and the person that I relied on for computer support at home. So I don't like to use a laptop. I want to use a desktop at home, and my desktop is not very mobile. But I've had this computer person for a number of years now who has come in and made sure that I have backup systems and that they're working and that all of the technology and the updates and the antivirus things are in place. But he's retiring too. And I'm hysterical now. I don't even know, are my backup systems working? Do I have the antivirus turned on? And I guess there are services that you can find, but I'm very reluctant to bring some stranger into my house and give them access to all of my financial accounts and all the kinds of things. And so I feel, I love working remotely. I have always worked remotely whenever I could for more than 47 years as an academic, because I want to be at home. I don't really want to be in the office. But if my technology doesn't work when I'm home, if Zoom stops updating or continues updating, whatever, then I won't be able to work at home. And so how does one solve that kind of problem?
So if I can interpret it.
I know, I might cheat. Felt the eyes. I think that there are definitely services, but I'm hearing you, it's a totally different situation. And I never thought from a, not being in a gigantic corporate machine where that is, an entire organization is set up and at the drop of a hat, I can call someone and they'll walk me through it in remote access into my laptop.
My stuff isn't remote.
No, I know.
I have all this physical stuff at home.
I think that you probably need someone locally who delivers that service, who you can trust, who you can develop a
Of
relationship
course,
with.
but
Who, where, how do you find it?
I have a referral for you.
There you go.
See, this is what it's all about.
Solving each other's problems.
So wait. The word we're gonna use for that is networking. It's not the way that we've used it before, right? But if you can I mean, I'm sure there are other people who are local to this area who could provide recommendations for other people you've mentioned. Okay.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Happy to be here. Good conversation. I just have a few questions. I don't know who would answer. First is talking about evolution of workspace. How has it, for those of you that have maybe employees over 50 or more underneath your belt, how has it evolved pre-COVID, post-COVID, given the fact that if you have kind of gone 100% remote or 99%, like you said, does it come at a cost that varies across generation for your employee? Like somebody was saying in a session I was earlier, a Gen Z might have need for certain type of technology or gadget to be able to do their work from home. Like she was just saying now, she preferred a desktop. You know, those are just like the basic hardware that we need to get our work done. I was just wondering, is there a huge financial gap from the multi-generational perspective when we're talking about workspace design? From what you've seen before over the years?
That's a very interesting question, Comfort, and I don't know if
From
I
an
have,
age perspective, from an age, a generational perspective.
Yeah.
right, and I don't know if I have any data on that.
I have a perspective
Oh,
though.
great.
I find that the younger, earlier in career employees are struggling far more in a hybrid environment than people who are later in their careers. And a lot of it is when you're early in your career, where do you find your social fabric? You graduate from college, you go to a new city, you're trying to find your place, you're trying to observe and learn and grow and scale, and you're really quite new to the entire thing. And when you're working remotely, we talked about observing behaviors and things like that. They feel very isolated and alone. That's just, you know, having multiple teams and multiple generations that I work with, that's my observation. The older employees, they love it. It's just like they're on cloud nine because they can show up to the office when they want to, they can manage their families, et cetera. It's a very different, they have their family and their local community is much more established.
So the follow-up question, just a quick one, yeah, is, I know it's not necessarily tied to this, but I think it will probably help me consolidate on what I've learned from this conference. So for you, Tessa, you say you work about 99% remote.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you. Has your job always been remote from time immemorial, or it's a thing of, okay, you became a boss, then you went remote?
So I think I graduated 25 years ago. It's only the last year and then the pandemic right before it that I was remote.
Okay.
But everyone at Cisco mostly works remotely. We go into the office when we are doing team meetings, when somebody needs to get away from the construction that they have going in the office, or they don't have a great private place. Maybe they share an apartment with roommates or something like that. So people have different situations, but it's very even in terms of we're all mostly from home.
Well, it's 3:01. I'd like to thank our panelists and thank you so much, everyone.